and all of a sudden I'd forget
Things.
It's terrible.
It's okay.
Right.
He'll make
Terrible.
it very easy for you.
Yeah,
Got
yeah.
you.
To make
All
it
right.
easy.
Well, let me introduce you, and we'll get started. So everybody, cameras up if you don't have your camera on. Remember to put your Hebrew name in, as part of your screen name, because it's Hebrew school and we're using our Hebrew names. Thank you for that. As everybody knows, we've been learning about the Holocaust, and this is the third of 4 sessions on the Shoah, the Holocaust. I'll tell what we're going to do next week near the end of this class. And I just want to start by saying that, tonight and tomorrow during the day is what's called Yom HaShoah. Have you?
Yeah. Already I got, I can't, of course, light them.
Candle.
Yeah, right. For the students, who recognizes that term? What is Yom HaShoah? Just raise your hand, unmute. You can put it in the chat if you want. Brendan?
It's Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is today.
That is correct. It starts tonight and then it goes into tomorrow also. So it's really appropriate that we're talking about the Holocaust today. I'll tell you that, so in Hebrew, it's Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day. In Israel, it has a little bit longer of a name that I really like. In Israel, they call tonight and tomorrow Yom HaShoah Ugvura. Gvura is the Hebrew word for courage, strength, and resilience. So when we remember the Holocaust, I think it's important that we don't just remember, the millions of people who were murdered, and we don't just remember the suffering, but that we also remember that there were many people who survived. There were people who resisted the Nazis in different ways, and there were even people who fought the Nazis, who fought back. So with that, we have a very special guest today. We have Hilde, who is a survivor of the Holocaust, and she's going to tell us her story. But first, why don't we let's embarrass one of our classmates just a little bit. Luke, go ahead. Why don't you tell us who is Grandma Hilde to you?
My great grandmother.
That's right. So this is Luke's great grandmother, everybody. And Luke's mom, Stacy, is there also. Hi, Stacy. So Hilde, why don't you tell us your story? And I'd like the students to please listen and think about what questions you might want to ask. Maybe think about asking questions of, what life was like for Hilde when she was your age, and how did she manage to survive? How did she make her way out of Europe and to this country? Write down some questions to ask when Hilde is done speaking, okay? All right, so Hilde, go ahead.
Hitler came to power in 1933. I was a very little girl, and I had an uncle in Berlin. We lived in Hamburg,
Germany.
Germany, of course, and he married a non-Jewish girl. My grandmother, who was a religious woman, she just accepted it. It was wonderful. My uncle saw that it was a very bad situation with Hitler getting into power, but nothing was happening that early. But he came to the United States in 1935. I was 10 then, and Hebrew was everything to me. And when my uncle came to the United States, I said to myself, I cannot continue with the Hebrew like that. I have to learn English. And that's what I did. I came here to this country speaking completely perfect, except with the English accent. But that's besides the point. I was very good at Hebrew. I loved it. I went to Hebrew school. Never did I personally have trouble in Hamburg, where I lived. Hamburg is a town or city that was at one time in history, if you want to, you can look it up, a free city. So they were not as happy with Hitler as any of the other towns we have. I went to a Jewish school for girls, and I have here, which I can give to Stacy to give to your class. This is written in, I have written what I had on November 9th, 1938, when it was Kristallnacht. I wrote something, and there's a lot of things written in this book here that was made by one of the synagogues here that I belong to. And
But you got out.
living there started getting very hectic, but personally, I can't tell you that anybody ever did anything to me. On the contrary, we lived in a house, a 6-family house, and there were 2 Jewish families, and the others, they were all very, very nice. We received in the school quite a number of girls who couldn't be left in schools around. It was so bad already then, in 1937 and 38, terrible. On Kristallnacht, we went to school the next day. I picked up my girlfriend, we picked up another girl. We went to school the same way we always do. Nobody did anything, nobody said anything. We got to school and the teacher was in the yard and says, girls, turn around, you have to go back to home right away. Don't talk to anybody, don't stop, just go home and lock the door. We didn't know what was. We went home. I went home. My mother and my grandmother, nothing. They said, all right, let's go. Let's go shopping. It's wonderful day. We had no idea what was. We did it. We got out of the streetcar. I can still see it. And that's a long time ago. And a young German guy, very well dressed, came over to us and said to my mother and grandmother, ladies, get on the next streetcar and go right back home. And we thought he was crazy. But he said, I mean it, do it. And my grandmother said, he said it, let's go. So that was that. Then the phone started to ring. Everybody called. They called their husbands. They took their husbands. They took their sons. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. That was the beginning.
When did you get out?
And from then, my mother tried to get that we could come to the America, to the consulate, the American consulate, and after all the men were
Taken.
taken on I can't talk
Concentration.
on the night of Kristallnacht. The men all and I had cousins who were taken 18 years and older, and my husband, whom of course I didn't know then, I can talk to you about him. He and his father were taken. It's the last time his father was in the store. They had a beautiful store. I know you want to hear about that. They were taken to Dachau, which was a horrible place. And my husband never talked about it, never. Except he told me when he and his father and all the other Jewish people from Munich were there, one of the Nazis said to them, well, you're all here now. You'll be shot tomorrow morning when the sun comes up. And that's how they had the first night there. But they did not do that. They let most of them out. And my husband came over here in June of 1939. And but of course I didn't know him. But after that, it became terrible. Every place you saw, dogs and Jews prohibited, everything. The park that I grew up with playing had big signs, Jewish, forbidden. It was horrible, absolutely horrible. Luckily, we lived in a very nice neighborhood. We had personally not anything. I just was very fortunate. I have had a very, very bright grandmother. She was intelligent. When the three of us got our visas, my mother, my grandmother, and I, we couldn't get any passage to come here. All the steamship lines were all taken until October, and this was August. My grandmother turned to my mother and said, we have been in Germany this long. We can be another week. Let's go to the German-American steamship line. She did. And we came and had an excellent trip. We had a wonderful trip. They treated us. And in Southampton, the ship became very crowded, Jewish and otherwise, because all the teachers used to go to Europe in the vacations, and they were over. The war was imminent. So we came here on August 17th, 1938, I guess. Was it? Yeah, of course. And 1939. And we were very lucky. We had a very good trip. And our family was here waiting for us. And Germany is completely, I had to go over, when was it? About 10 years, 15 years, for something that was at the store that my father-in-law had to give up, of course.
So Rabbi Pine, my grandfather, Ernest, his family was very prominent in the town and city of Munich.
Mm.
And he owned a department store, which employed a lot of the citizens, residents of the town of Munich. They were very well off. They had servants in their house. And of course, it was all taken away.
Yeah.
Hitler took everything from them. And then when they came to this country, it was shock because, they're used to being served and having things given to them and all the wealth. And of course, in this country, they had to work for everything. They didn't speak any English. They only spoke German. And it was very, 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 very hard for
Well,
them.
you're forgetting that
Um,
that my
Husband.
my husband's parents, I guess he had some money in his pockets. I don't know what. They left Germany in 1941 and landed in Russia and tried to get to America. And this was already, it was just before the war, before Pearl Harbor. The American consulates were closed, and my in-laws stayed in China the whole war.
Yeah.
And I just have to tell you this. They were treated very well in China. The Japanese did not touch them, the Jews. They let them there. My father-in-law worked for something. No, did I think picture frames until it got very bad there too. But they lived there until 1946.
Wow.
And he came here saying, oh, the Japanese, they're good people. This was after the war. I mean, I hated them as much as I hated the Nazis. I couldn't believe why he said that, but that was the reason.
Huh.
Because they didn't do anything against any of the Jews.
Huh.
And there is a story. I don't know. I have never looked it up in history, that there was a time when Japan was again taken over by China, and they had no money. And one of the Japanese knew the Rothschilds. You may have heard the name of that.
Yes.
Very, very rich people in Europe. And they gave a big, big sum of money to the Japanese that they needed, and they've never forgotten it. I've never heard of it, but it's true.
What if we just pause for a minute and let's see if the students have any questions for you, Hilde, about
Yeah, they may have what was in, whether we were called names or whatever there was.
right.
Ask me anything.
So you can put questions, students, you can put questions in the chat if that's easier for you, or you can unmute to ask Hilde. Remember, she lived in
Personal
Germany.
questions.
She lived in Germany at the start of the war, but she got out. She made it to this country in August of 1939. World War II continued until
September 1st.
until 1945. So
Yeah.
she was lucky. She was very lucky.
We were very lucky. And my grandmother's taking that. The next ship was called back. War was already. So we were very lucky.
Hilde, here's one question. One of the students asked, And you mentioned this, but just if you could say again, were any of the Germans mean to you?
No,
Again, very lucky that you didn't have that experience.
no.
Did anyone else in your family survive?
Oh,
Your
yeah.
father?
Oh, to survive there? No. My father was killed. Um, some uncles and aunts on my father's side, but my grandmother lost her sister. That is very difficult for me because she could have gotten out. And
A lot of friends.
a lot of my friends, school, I mean, I can't even tell you how I feel about that. When I think about a lot of girlfriends that I had, they were just killed.
Yeah.
And when I went back to Germany, I had to, I went back because I had to go to Munich to do something there because it's the store. And my husband was gone already. And they were very, very nice to me there. And I was like, I didn't mean to be in Germany. It was very nice. And my town, the city of Hamburg, invited everybody who was there and is still alive to come for a visit. And I wouldn't go, but I finally went. I took my daughter and we both went, and I couldn't wait to get out.
Huh.
I couldn't wait to get out.
Wait, so when was that, Hilde? When did you go back to Munich? Germany?
1995.
Huh. Okay.
In Munich, I didn't feel that way. There, it was entirely different. But in Hamburg, no.
It hit a little too close to home.
It was the house that we lived in was still standing. It's still standing now. It was still standing. There was nothing where we lived. They weren't bombed or anything. I didn't care. I showed my daughter, here's where I played when I was little, but me, I did not. It seems to me when I came back to the States, I mean, I almost kissed, if I could have been, if I wasn't that old, I would have knelt down and kissed the ground. I really mean it when I was back.
Yeah. One of the students asked if when you were a girl, like in the 1930s, did you understand that the Nazis were taking over and that things were changing in the country?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We knew that they arrested people who went with Christian girls, men, and the girls too.
They put signs in the window.
It's
Right, they put signs in the window. No Jews allowed.
signs in the windows, of course, in certain windows, and it was awful. It was just awful. And when I went back to Germany, the schoolhouse was also standing, and they had a school for children who had problems, and the third floor or fourth floor was a memorial to the girls that were killed.
Wow.
And I will never forget when I went up there.
Mm.
The first thing I saw was a picture of two sisters. They were only 11 months apart, so they were both in my class. Very, very, very religious. They didn't let us go on grass on Shabbos because it really, and very, very religious. And I walked up, I can still see it, when I was at that memorial thing. And there was a picture this high of the two girls. And that made the end of my visit there. I just couldn't look any German person in the face. I couldn't. I didn't want to touch anything there because I thought maybe the hands had something to do with killing my people.
Huh.
Couldn't do it.
Are there other questions from the students? You were asking good questions. It's good it's good to be able to ask someone like Hilde who experienced something that we've only been learning about from books and videos. Anyone else have questions? Well, one of the students, Hilde, wants to know, did you have nightmares because of what you experienced?
I still do.
Still do.
I still do. As a matter of fact, I have seen I don't know what he is, a little bit,
Therapist?
yeah. And he said to me, you've got to put it,
Behind
so
you.
I can't. Every day of my life, there is something that reminds me. Every day. And I try to tell myself, don't be ridiculous. And I tell you the truth, 6th of January did not help me. I'm afraid you have no idea how. Because that's all I can think of. If it happens, I hate to tell you this, what happened to my grandmother when we were here. My uncle had made friends, so there was a gentleman that came to visit my uncle's, family that came. And my grandmother, she was, I would say, in his late 50s. I could still see it in my grandfather, in my uncle's kitchen. My grandmother said to him, tell me, do you think anything like that can ever happen in this country? And he thought and looked, and finally he came out and he said, yes, of course, God forbid it ever does. But if it does, I bet you that not one person will get out alive. And I have never forgotten that. And that's why I am so scared.
Hilde, one of the students just asked, did your husband ever say anything to you about Dachau and what he experienced?
No, never, and never to the kids. I mean, I have 2 sons and a daughter, not to my sons. And when I was in Munich, they wanted to go, to show me Dachau. I said, no, I can't, because I will never go to sleep with that. I can't, I didn't go. I had my husband, I had my father-in-law. As a matter of fact, they gave my father-in-law earlier out to get out, because he had I don't know what it's called anymore. I knew what it was. Given it's World War One. So they put him out after 3 weeks or 4 weeks. My husband was in there 6 weeks. Excuse me. Never talked about it. Never, 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 except what I told you, never. And he was more, he laughed when he saw something on television. I don't know what made him do that. I don't know. Whenever I see or hear what do you call it? The Hakenkreuz, the what is it called? Their sign.
Oh, the
Yeah,
swastika.
Huh?
The swastika?
yeah.
Yeah, the swastika sign.
When I see that sign, I go crazy. That'll never leave me. And I believe anybody who comes and has feelings feels that way. You can't believe how a human being can be so that I could never believe.
Rabbi, I know that time is coming to an end.
Yeah.
Grandma, she enjoyed talking to you. So anytime
Very much.
you want her to come back and chat, she will.
Yes, and I will, if you're interested in
She has a lot of
this is the story by me of the story I told you that we went back to home that day.
Right.
And this is a story of children and other relatives of people who were taken into whatever on Christian night. But it's written in English. You might be able to read it, to want to read it. I will give it to Luke to give to you. You
Okay.
may want to read it.
I would like to read it, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, and I have a book. I don't know, I have it here somewhere. It's this thick and this big, and it has the name, the birthday of every child, and when they were taken, and where they were taken, when they were killed, and how they were killed.
Wow.
I have that book. It's so heavy.
Yeah.
It's pathetic. It's pathetic.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at that families with children, and I kept looking. Friends of mine, horrible teachers of the school, and when I was in Hamburg, the synagogue. I mean, we had about 7, 8, 9 synagogues in Hamburg, a big city. And the biggest synagogue they tore down. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous synagogue. And my grandmother's brother, one brother, was an architect, and he was the architect of that synagogue.
Wow.
And when I went to Hamburg, I knew it was gone. There was just a plaque having his name, that he was the architect when it was standing there. But not too far from it, half a block, the school of the boys, the Talmud Torah, was standing and completely like nothing had happened. And it didn't. I went to that school. My school also stayed, except they made the upstairs say memorial.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, Hildy, there's obviously there's so much there's so much that you could tell us, but I mean, Stacy's right. We are pretty much out of time for today. So um, I just would like all the students, if you could just, you're muted, but just let's give Hildy a round of applause, everybody. Hildy, thank you so much for being with us today.
That's all right.
I really,
I
we all
could,
enjoyed hearing your story.
I wish I had better stories to tell.
No, your story is great. It's, that's
Part of history.
That's right.
You have to learn.
That's right.
Everybody likes to hear it,
Yeah. Rabbi, anytime, she'll be more than happy to chat with anybody.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime. She'll love to chat.
I'll want to bring you back, Hildy. And Stacy, like I said, I recorded this, so I'll send you the recording.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
We're good. All right.
It was really nice to meet you. I know my Stacy talks about the synagogue. I've been there too, years ago.
And God willing, she'll be there in November.
That's
Yes.
right. That's
Oh,
right.
oh my God, I'm too.
You'll be
All
there.
right, Rabbi, we're gonna head out. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Hildy.
Bye.
All right, everybody, that was terrific. So that was Hildy, just an eyewitness to history. She was there, when Hitler was rising to power. She sensed what was going on. She was very lucky to get out. And she was from a very wealthy family, right? Who remembers what her father did? What did he own? Judith.
He owned a clothing store.
That's right. It was in Munich, which is a big city in Germany, a major metropolis. He owned, it was a clothing store, or what we call a department store, sort of like Macy's, or Nordstrom's. It was like that. He owned it. So they were very wealthy. And like Hildy said, the Nazis took everything away, and they had to run for their lives, and they made it to America, but life was hard because they were used to, she was funny, they were used to like being served everything, right? Like having servants. So what an experience. So I'll just tell you, for next week, we're gonna do one more session on the Holocaust. We're gonna talk another great story of resistance and fighting, the story of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which is really just a terrific story. We'll talk about that next week. And we should have another guest, another survivor of the Holocaust, who's going to join us next week as well. I'm lining that up. So that'll be on the 14th. We'll look forward to that. And remember tonight at 7:00 is the synagogue's Yom HaShoah virtual program. It'll just be about 20 minutes. And that will include some of the Hebrew high school students will be reading names of some of the kids who were murdered by the Nazis during the Holocaust. Hildy talked about that big book that she has. I have a list of, names of children who were killed. So, and that's something that next year you'll be able to do also. Like if, in a couple of weeks, we'll talk about Hebrew high school and your transition from 7th grade to 8th grade. So, but it's all good. Okay, so everybody, thanks for coming today, and have a good night, and see you next week.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
You.
Thank you. Thanks. Brendan, tell your mom I said hello, if you're there, or not.